Okay, you could go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caleb Kaur, and together with my co-facilitator, Malika, we'd like to welcome you to our presentation for Business 203, Leadership and Ethics, CRN 11178. Today, we'll be focusing on Chapter 5, Understanding Others from the Exploring Leadership textbook by Comize, Lucas, and McMahon. This chapter explores how effective leaders connect with and appreciate the diversity in the people they work with. It reminds us that leadership isn't just about giving directions or making decisions, but it's about listening, empathizing, and building trust. It's about understanding others and how that allows leaders to create inclusive environments where everyone feels valued and motivated to contribute. During our presentation, we'll highlight key ideas from the chapter, discuss the importance in ethical leadership, and share examples of how these principles can be applied in real-world situations. Before we dive in, here's a quick look of our agenda for today so you'll know what to expect throughout the presentation. I will be leading you from sections 1, which is the overview, to section 10, which is the attitudes towards differences. And then I will pass you on to my partner, who will lead you through section 11, cultural influences on leadership behavior, to section 19, the conclusion. Now that you know the structure of our presentation, let's start with a quick overview of what this presentation is all about. This presentation is focused on examining how factors such as gender, ethnicity, and culture shapes leadership by highlighting the importance of understanding differences in order to build inclusive and empowering leadership. It looks at various leadership processes like communication, conflict resolution, and decision making that are all influenced by diverse perspectives. Sorry about that. By the end of the session, you will be able to, one, explain the importance of understanding others in effective leadership, two, recognize the role of individuality, commonality, and diversity in shaping group dynamics, identify how cultural heritage and attitudes towards differences influence leadership practices, demonstrate effective communication strategies that build empathy, inclusion, and collaboration. And lastly, we hope that you will be able to apply these concepts to real-life leadership situations in teams, organizations, and communities. Now, with that general understanding, let's get into it. Leadership is about relationships, sorry, not titles. It's about understanding others and how that's the key to inclusion and collaboration. Today's focus will be on how leaders connect with diverse people and perspectives. Strong leaders respect differences, find common ground, and build trust. Question: when you hear understanding others, what comes to mind? Anyone?
I would say empathy.
Okay, yes, that's a good point. Anyone else? No? Well, a big part of understanding others comes from recognizing both our uniqueness and what connects us. We'll be first looking at individuality and commonality. We all come from different backgrounds and have our individual experiences that shapes us to be the person that we are. However, we all share universal traits, whether that be some of our shared wants, needs, values, experiences, etc. It is up to an effective leader to balance respect for differences he or she may have with finding common ground for the betterment of the team and business as a whole. Kumail Lucas and McMahon states that in the grand scheme of living human species, we are more alike than we are different. Research into the human genome has certainly confirmed this. Finding common human purpose is the focus on which to center our perceptions of difference. In any group setting, you can observe and witness other people who look like you, whether that be as a result of our racial or ethnic characteristics, symbolic attire that we wear, or the ideas and experiences we share with one another. It can be observed that we are more similar than we think. The second thing that I would like to talk about is understanding gender diversity. It is salient to ask yourself, how does my gender influence my attitudes and behavior? Gender influences rules and expectations, as historically, leadership has been seen as a predominantly male trait. However, today a push for equity and representation is seen. However, barriers are still in place, such as stereotypes and unequal opportunities, etc. Traditionally, it has been stated that men and women tend to lead teams differently, with female leaders tending to be more interactive and wanting to keep interactions extended and vital until the interaction has worked through its emotional content, with male leaders, on the other hand, tending to be more transactional in their interactions. That is, they are unconsciously thinking, I am in this relationship to give something in order to get something. Typically, once the transaction of the interaction is complete, they tend to move away from the interaction and back to their more solitary task. Female leaders, on the other, tend to collaborate more connectively by seeking possible connections between each person's different ideas and trying to find developmental elements in connectivity. Men tend to collaborate competitively by including more testing of each other's ideas against worst case. Sex roles and gender roles. The two terms are often used interchangeably, but sex roles are those expectations resulting from biology, such as pregnancy or muscle mass, whereas gender roles are socially constructed expectations that get labeled as masculine or feminine. To understand how men and women have come to be as they are, we can learn from children's development. The way we play in our childhood establishes patterns of how we work and communicate as adults. Oftentimes, we often encourage our boys to play outside in rough and tumble games. However, we encourage our girls to play inside in calm settings with one another or with small groups. From the plays that we encourage our boys to do, this stresses competitiveness, whereas we stresses our girls to value intimacy and social relationships. The social learning that happens with play and many other experiences often leads females to seek and value intimacy and relationships, whereas males often seek and value independence. Intimacy is key in a world of connection in which individuals negotiate complex networks of friendships, minimize differences, try to reach consensus, and value the appearance of superiority, which could highlight differences. Childhood play experiences also contribute to the development of the thinking or feeling orientation described in the gender and preference types. Remember that there is great variation among men and among women, but these patterns do raise our awareness and understanding of differences. Understanding cultural diversity. Culture encompasses everything about how a group of people thinks, feels, and behaves. It is a pattern of knowledge, it is a body of common understandings. Culture is the Tom Sawyer ways of living. It includes our values, beliefs, aesthetic standards, linguistic expression, patterns of thinking, behavioral norms, and styles of communication which a group of people have developed to assure its survival in a particular physical and human environment. Cultural influences. Culture is equal to the values and traditions and perspectives. Culture impacts leadership through communication styles, whether that is directly or indirectly. Decision making, whether we make decisions for ourselves or as a group, or conflict resolution, that being the way we approach resolving conflicts that arise in the workplace. Understanding multiculturalism. Culture is therefore a broad term that could be applied to an office or a campus, to aging, or to a group of people who share a common race or ethnicity. Many cultures coexist simultaneously in any group. Effective leaders need to develop an appreciation for multiculturalism to build inclusiveness, collaboration, and common purposes. A prerequisite to developing a greater sense of multiculturalism is the conscious awareness of culturally informed assumption. Here I am providing a real-life example in the workplace via workplace communication styles. In many Western cultures, employees value direct communication. That's communication that is clear, direct, and straightforward. This is often seen as professional. However, in some Asian cultures, employees prefer indirect communication, that is, avoiding direct disagreement to maintain harmony and respect. A leader unaware of this difference may think that an employee is being unclear or evasive when in fact they are showing politeness and respect. A key takeaway that leaders must take is that great leaders adapt their communication style and create an environment where everyone feels comfortable expressing themselves. Understanding international diversity. Understanding how to work with persons from other countries is even more complex, but can be an exciting and rewarding experience. As Javidan and House noted in describing global leaders, to be successful in dealing with people from other cultures, managers need knowledge about cultural differences and similarities among countries. They also need to understand the implications of their differences and the skills required to act and decide appropriately and in a culturally sensitive way. Global leadership. Kester Vries and Florian Tracy note that global leadership development means increasing one's adaptability, cultural empathy, acceptance of ambiguity, lack of xenophobia, cultural relativity, awareness of one's own roots and cultural biases, and as if quality. Globalization is working with different countries and cultures. However, challenges arise such as time zones and logistics, language barriers, and different workplace norms. Leaders must be adaptable and culturally sensitive. Example being an international team. For in this case, the US team expects direct feedback and the Korean team expects indirect feedback. Without awareness, misunderstandings arise and it sets back the project. However, with awareness, stronger collaboration can be observed. Question. If you were leading an international team, what one strategy you would use to keep everyone included? Anyone? No? Well, I'd like for you to think about it. Hopefully, as we go forward, you get the answer. Your cultural heritage. I encourage you to read about your cultural heritage to see how you may have acquired the values and beliefs of your culture or ethnicity and in what ways you have strayed from them. I also encourage you to read about culture that is different from that of your own. Annie Millstone stated that the benefits of working with people who are different from you are extreme. If you are an effective leader, you will be inclusive in many facets of the world. As an individual in a leadership position, it is crucial to possess the ability to hear and be open-minded and inclusive of different people or different ideas. This ability to accept and work with one another strongly adds to the knowledge base of the group. things that I recommend you study would be European culture, African or American culture, or international cultures, whether that be Asian culture, Creole culture, whether that be of the French police of Louisiana, or the Hispanic or Spanish cultures. Again, learn more about aging and adult development, deaf culture, religious diversity, and regional differences. In any case, it will be useful to be aware of the assumptions that a person coming into a group might have. Building multicultural appreciation. Being an effective leader or participant in a diverse organization or being a leader who brings diversity to the organization requires that we know more about developing an openness and appreciation of various cultures and aspects of how others may differ. Individuals need to develop their awareness, knowledge, and skills to be able to work effectively in a multicultural environment. David Hoop's intercultural learning process model. This model describes how we develop and learn to communicate clearly and understand people and cultures that seem different from our own. The first step is ethnocentrism. This is a human survival response that tells us our own culture is best. Individuals at this stage may exhibit intolerance and outright hostility or aggression towards other cultures. Individuals who do not move beyond this stage tend to feel their culture is superior and impose it on others. We then see our transition stages, with the first being awareness. This is the first step out of ethnocentrism. This stage involves the acknowledgement that other cultures exist and the awareness that they have a culture. The individual at this stage becomes aware that differences are culturally based and that they are a part of a given people's way of thinking and acting. Next, we have understanding. This stage involves the acquiring of knowledge and information about other cultures on a rational cognitive level. At this stage, the individual begins to piece together the puzzle of the other culture from pieces of information about values, customs, etc. It occurs in a detached and separate way. Next, we have acceptance or respect. And individuals at this stage accept the validity of other cultures without comparing or judging them against one's own culture. A change in attitude of it's okay for them occurs in a realistic approach. A live and let live attitude results, and the value of other cultures is for others, not me. We then see other transition stages, with the first being appreciating or valuing. At this stage, one begins to understand that cultures have strengths and weaknesses, such as understanding leads to appreciation and valuing of specific aspects of other cultures. Here we can see a change from objectivity to subjectivity, considering cultural aspects in terms of one's own identity and values. Next is selective adoption. The individual at this stage tries and adopts new attitudes and behaviors from other cultures, which are believed to be useful and desirable to emulate. Aspects of another culture which have value and worth for individual personally are integrated into his or her ways of thinking, feeling, or acting. Lastly is multiculturalism. This is an ideal state and an ongoing process where persons are able to feel comfortable in and communicate effectively with people from many cultures and in many situations. Identities, self-concepts, outlook, and value formation transcends cultural considerations. People at this stage are very open to new experiences. Multiculturalism. The goal of this process is multiculturalism, which is not a final state, however, an ongoing process of comfort in learning about and appreciating other cultures. It is a lifelong learning task. This openness to new experiences enriches a person's own life and makes it possible to share aspects of a person's own culture that may be of value to others. Imagine this intercultural learning process from the previous few slides, helping the Asian culture to be more open to youth culture, or the Black Student Union and the Jewish Student Union coming to an appreciation of each other's perspectives. A major benefit of multiculturalism is to grow beyond seeing the world only in our own terms to seeing the legitimate views of others. This appreciation does not mean we will agree or even find decision making easy, but it should mean that we will understand other views. Attitudes towards differences. How we view others who are different from ourselves is complex. There is some evidence that this is a developmental or sequential process during which we move from complete unawareness as a child to some degree of acceptance or appreciation as a mature adult. Throughout the years, we begin to learn through either positive experiences or negative experiences. And as a result of these experiences, some people learn to dislike and fear differences. In extreme cases of this, fear can lead to racism, homophobia, or sexism. However, other experiences lead us to be appreciative and to embrace many differences. The Riddle scale attitudes towards difference. This model was originally developed as a scale for homophobia to understand attitudes towards gay and lesbian people. However, we have found it helpful as a conceptual model for understanding other differences, as well as attitudes towards people with physical disabilities or different religious practices. We will first start off with negative level attitudes. There are four in total. The first being repulsion. This is where people view others who are different as strange, sick, crazy, and aversive. People at this stage view anything that will change them to be more normal or part of the mainstream as justifiable. The second is pity. People views people who are different as somehow born that way and feels that it is pitiful, sees being different as definitely immature and less preferred. So to help those poor individuals, one should reinforce normal behaviors. The third is tolerance. This sees being different as just a phase of development that most people grew out of. Thus, one should protect and tolerate those who are different as one does a child who is still learning. The last of negative levels of attitudes is acceptance. This implies that one needs to make accommodation for another's person's differences. This does not acknowledge that the other's identity may be of the same value as one's own. Next is positive levels of attitude, in which there is also four. The first being support. This works to safeguard the rights of those who are different. One may be uncomfortable oneself, but one is aware of the climate and the irrational unfairness in our society. The second is admiration. This acknowledges that being different in our society takes strength. One is willing to truly look at oneself and work on their own personal biases. The third one is appreciation. This values the diversity of people and is willing to confront insensitive attitudes. The last is nurturance. This assumes the differences in people are indispensable in society, views differences with genuine affection and delight, and is willing to be an advocate of those differences. I will now pass you on to my co-facilitator, Malaika.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malika Phipps, and today I will be taking you through slides 27 to 41 of our presentation. Now we'll be looking at cultural influences on leadership behavior. There are steps you must take in order to be an effective relational leader. It requires awareness of how the aspects of diversity, such as sex, race, ethnicity, age, sexual identity, religion, ability, socioeconomic status, influence our own behavior and that of others in groups. Cultural influences make it that no group is the same, with different personality preferences, attitudes, styles, value systems, beliefs, opinions. Many leadership practices could be described as participative because they value the empowerment of followers. But relational and pluralistic leadership seeks to change the very culture of the organization or group to see the diversity of the group as a true asset. It would be inaccurate to describe people based on only one aspect of their identity. Not so? And that's because behaviors grow from a complex interaction of many salient background factors. It is more useful to observe people's behaviors and seek to understand their attitudes than to presume differences among people that are based on stereotypes. It's useful to examine the range of human behaviors that are essential in leadership settings. Consider the cultural influences in such leadership processes as communications, conflict resolution, and decision making. And ignorance of the benefits of diversity, right, can truly hinder any group. To be successful as a leader or in a leadership role, one should always consider perspectives from a variety of people or groups, said Rebecca Mooney, a resident assistant at the University of Maryland. Now we'll look at communication. In a group setting, you may observe a range of behaviors. Some people may be highly verbal with strong oral traditions. Others may be verbally reserved, preferring thoughtful writing, much like myself. Some may be outgoing, expressive, and emotional, whereas the cultural assumptions of others lead them to be thoughtful, objective, and analytical. Depending on the mix of individuals, some will be open and revealing, whereas others will be closed and guarded. In some cases, some cultural assumptions lead people to be direct and factual, and others have learned to be symbolic and metaphorical. Some people have been taught to value direct, bold eye contact, while others find respect in indirect body language. Some have learned to be timely and to value promptness, while other cultures value casual approaches. Understanding the mix of preferred communication patterns in any group helps the group be more informed in its interaction. So instead of judging someone as wrong or disrespectful, it's useful to ask yourself within that person's context, how do I understand this action or practice? And how would they want to be treated? Next, we'll look at speech communities. A speech community exists when people share norms about how to use talk and what purposes it serves. The idea of speech communities have been found to be useful with the aspects of communication. This can be important to keep in mind because persons from different speech communities may misunderstand each other. Speech communities can be determined by gender, ethnicity, workplace interests, or other groupings that share a common core of patterns about language and how it is used. Recognizing and respecting different speech communities increases our ability to participate completely in a diverse culture. An example of a speech community would be slang, or what we now call brain rot, amongst younger generations of people on various social media platforms like TikTok and YouTube. They kind of have their own language. How many of you would know what the term 6-7 means? I, for one, don't, and having it explained to me when I don't use it daily would make it a difficult concept to grasp. Nonverbal communication. Nonverbal patterns reflect the values, perspectives, norms, and heritage of specific cultures. We communicate with our physical appearance, personal space, facial expressions, gestures, touching, eye contact, the expression of emotions, and orientation towards time. Conflict resolution. You might observe individuals with a range of behaviors, from the confrontational to the very subtle. Some people may encourage taking responsibility and being accountable, whereas others will tend to blame. Others will seek harmony and face saving. Some believe their way is right and are closed to other opinions, whereas others seek connections among options. Some resolve conflict by being deferential to authority, whereas others have learned to be confrontational to authority figures. And finally, some people will link resolution to values like harmony with nature. Conflict resolution is a critical aspect of relational leadership. Almost any change effort will involve some degree of conflict. Remaining focused on the purpose of the change while maintaining positive relationships is necessary. It is important to remain ethical and inclusive. Decision making. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll look at decision making. The way in which decisions are made reflects either those who value the power of majority rule and prefer voting, or those who seek inclusion of the minority opinion and value consensus. In some groups, if the will of the group does not emerge as apparent, an issue may be dropped completely and brought up at a later time. Some believe the hierarchy and or authorities should decide, whereas others think the experts or those involved should decide. Relational leadership requires communication skills that help each person seek to understand others, not just persuade them. All communicators should constantly ask themselves, how do my perspectives and preferences shade my view? In what ways could I be understood more correctly and understand with greater insight? Next slide. Right. Leadership and communication. Leadership skills involve far more than persuasive talking or skillful writing. The Chinese language, like many Asian languages, includes symbols that depict related concepts to create new meaning. The Chinese pictogram for listening is made up of symbols for ears, eyes, and heart. You can see that on the screen. Listening is when you use your ears, eyes, and heart, is what Chinese people believe, to give undivided attention. Listening is a purposive activity, requiring one to be intentionally mindful. True listening is far from passive activity. Listening and communicating in a pluralistic context requires one to listen with empathy. Listening with empathy is an intellectual and emotional participation in another person's experience. Empathy means you are using another person's standards and reference points to understand that person's experience. In contrast, sympathy is putting yourself in the other person's place, but retaining your own perspectives and still using your own standard of judgment. Next slide, please. Communication involves both verbal and nonverbal components. Think of the complexity in this verbal process. What I meant to say, what I actually said, what you heard me say, what you think I mean, what you mean to say, what you actually say, what I hear you say, what I think you mean. Each element in that process is influenced by our cultural and gender influences. Speech speech differs by men and women standards. Men's speech promotes their independence and is often used to share information or opinions, to tell jokes, or to relate stories. Women's speech, however, even in public settings like meetings or classes, seeks to find connections with others and build relationships. Often, women will add a tagline to the beginning or end of an opinion to provide bridges for others in the conversation. They do not want to stand out or apart. For example, a woman might say, it's just my opinion, but, or I know there are many different views, but, or I think, do you agree or disagree with that? Assertive communication. Next slide, please. In every communication, each person has a right to be heard and a responsibility to listen. Each has a right to make a request or ask a question, and the recipient has the right to make his or her own decision without apology. Imagine an assertiveness continuum with three positions. A person might be unassertive, assertive, or aggressive. Being assertive does not mean that you get your own way, but that you did what you could to be understood. In a similar way, practicing relational leadership does not mean that the group will go along with what you think should happen in the group, but what you have done your best to respect their involvement. Listen for true understanding and be a productive community member. On the next slide, we'll see illustrations of unassertive, assertive, and aggressive communication. Okay, so let's look at this question. Could you substitute for me at the event tonight? I have had something come up and cannot go after all. An assertive response would be, okay, sure, I guess I can. When we look at this response, it shows that, oh, y'all can't see these slides properly? Anyone else having issues seeing the slides?
We're seeing.
Okay. All right, well, I'll continue. Okay. Right. So the unassertive response to okay to this question would be okay, sure, I guess I can. Even though you have several plans, you reply almost meekly. You deny your own rights and are intimidated into compliance. You may feel trapped or afraid to say no. You are fairly passive. The assertive response would be, no, I have other plans and cannot do it. Or depending on your style, you might say, I am sorry, I cannot substitute. You might ask me again at some time when I would have a little more time to change my plans. But thanks for thinking of me. This is the assertive response. This response acknowledges that the other person had every right to ask, and you have a right to make your own decision. Being assertive means you can say no without feeling guilty or without apologizing. The aggressive response, however, would be, how dare you ask me to do this? You always slack off on your responsibilities, and I won't stand for it. This response denies the other person had any right to even ask for your help and is rarely the appropriate approach. Next slide, please. Now we'll look at relational empathy. Relational empathy goes beyond merely understanding another and seeks shared meaning. Relational empathy recognizes the importance of context. It may mean creating a new third culture that synthesizes the positions from the two individual perspectives, culture and context, and builds a new culture, an environment of empathy and insight. As sharing of context takes place, organizations of diverse people start weaving a new context. This third culture or common context develops its own jargon, definitions, visions, and understandings, through which members from different contexts can come together. In these organizations, the culture says people are good, honest, and trustworthy. People are purposeful. Each individual has a unique contribution to make. Complex problems require local solutions. Me and you versus me or you. These beliefs about goodness of people guide how we approach others. If you think no one will get along in the group, conflict is bound to happen and be harmful. If you believe people will avoid responsibility, then you may shape your own behavior to be controlling and negative, and you may act discouraged. Imagine this. You go to your first group project meeting thinking that people will just slack off and that you will end up doing all the work and that no one will really care. You'll end up looking for evidence of those assumptions, and at the smallest indication, you'll think, aha, I knew that. You should instead take this approach. Go to your first project committee meeting thinking, we are all busy, so we will have to be careful about what we take on. But people will want to do their part, and we can come up with something worthwhile. The biggest difference is how a setting is perceived, is the internal assumptions that guide expectations. How one will be in that setting and how being that way brings out responses in others. Building this new third culture meets the challenge inherent in the opening question. How am I like everyone else here? And that brings us to the end of this chapter. Now we have this chapter summary. The ability to understand others, be understood by others, and together create an effective organizational or group environment is the challenge of relational leadership. Truly understanding the influence of our cultural heritage, gender, and other aspects of our differences helps us work together towards change. We usually find we are more alike than we are different. Expecting commonalities, goodwill, and shared purposes can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. This awareness helps us create a new third culture in any group. Now, to conclude, we looked at the key points to understanding others, and they were broken down into 14 sections as we explore the chapter in preparation to share its contents with the class today. We learned that understanding others is the foundation to building relationships. And in order to be an effective leader, you should first know your team. We hope that this presentation got that message across clearly and effectively. This now brings us to the end of our presentation. If there are any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.